Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, January the 20th, 2025. It's a big day. Donald Trump is going to be inaugurated. He's going to become President of the United States for a second time. And I want to look at the horoscope of the inauguration, and I want to consider the next 4 years and perhaps what we should be looking for, and I suppose consider where the trouble spots might be, what might go wrong. But before I look at Trump's inauguration, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, January the 20th. Now, I have to ask, if you do like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be very happy if you were to subscribe. So let's look at what is happening today. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York, and we can see that the moon is at 18 degrees Libra, so no sign changes for the moon. Moon is going to be in Libra all day long, and you could say that's quite a civilized placement for the moon. The moon is about harmony, things working well. I mean, things working well in the sense that there is a sense of balance. We understand how our behavior can influence other people, and it works both ways. Though the moon is in late Libra, the moon is in the Via Combusta. So the Via Combusta is that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio, and when the moon is in the Via Combusta, things can happen that we weren't necessarily expecting, and it's important not to have fixed plans, so the more flexible we can be, the better. Of course, it does mean that Donald Trump is going to be inaugurated with the moon in the Via Combusta, and that may say something about his presidency. We shouldn't necessarily think that the presidency is going to go in a particular way, and perhaps Trump will get involved with things which don't necessarily work to plan. But I'll be considering Trump's presidency at the end of the video. The point is, we just have to not make too many assumptions about the way things work out. Now, the moon doesn't actually do a great deal in terms of making aspects. The moon makes a trine to Jupiter, it makes a square to Mercury, and really that's it. And so moon trine Jupiter, I mean, it's a pleasant aspect, moon trine Jupiter. You could say that it's quite a fortunate aspect, that things will work well, but it's kind of separating. Certainly looked at from a perspective of the Americas. So for us mortals, maybe not for the president or the future president, for us mortals, it should be an okay day with moon trine Jupiter. Gently things work, but maybe not spectacularly. And additionally, moon is square Mercury. Now, moon square Mercury is a bit tense, not super tense, but there is a certain tension in the air, and we feel we want to say something, but we're not always able to say it in quite the way we want. And that is because we've got the two communication planets. Moon is more about emotional communication. Mercury is more about sort of mental communication. Communication, the moon, I suppose, communication from the heart. Mercury, communication from the mind. And these two planets are in square aspect, so there is a bit of a struggle to communicate. And this moon square Mercury is linked with Chiron, so you can see that the moon is opposition Chiron, and Mercury is on the T, so we've got a T square. And moon opposition Chiron, maybe a feeling of being, well, wounded, I suppose, is one way of looking at it. I mean, there are a few people in America, maybe nearly half the American population, are going to feel moon opposition Chiron, somewhat wounded by the fact that the wrong person won the election. And with that wound, what do you do about it? The struggle is to say what's on your mind. So that's one possibility. Moon opposition Chiron is also about the overall need to communicate with one's heart in a fairly abrupt way, perhaps. I mean, that Chiron could be abrupt because Chiron wants to make an impression. In fact, emotionally, it may be very important for some of us to make an impression, and we're not going to be too worried about what kind of reaction we get. Chiron is a maverick. Chiron likes to do things differently, and Mercury making a square to Chiron, starting to make a square to Chiron, that may say something about what we say, and it may be the words we use are somewhat dramatic. But I don't want to say too much about this T-square. I mean, it's quite brief, and so I don't think it's necessarily going to define the whole day. And I should also point out that the Sun is in Aquarius now. I mean, I talked about the Sun in Aquarius when I did my video for the weekend, and the Sun went into Aquarius, well, at 8 o'clock in the evening on Sunday, London time. So this is the first full day that the Sun is in Aquarius. This always happens when the president gets inaugurated, because the presidents get inaugurated on January the 20th. And so that is the nature of the American system. Sun at 0 degrees Aquarius, or maybe 1 Aquarius, but the Sun right at the beginning of the Aquarius, and new president, and that's the way America is set up. But we're starting to really feel the Sun in Aquarius now. Sun out of Capricorn into Aquarius, and Sun in Aquarius is about ideas. What is important to us, and we're not necessarily going to be too flexible about these ideas, because Sun in Aquarius, it is a fixed sign. And of course, the Sun is conjunct Pluto. Now, that Sun conjunct Pluto isn't exact today, but over the next couple of days, it will be making the exact conjunction. I mean, in fact, the Sun is already within 1 degree of Pluto. So that is quite intense, that is quite opinionated. And so many of us may find it difficult to change their minds. And that goes back to the politics. If you are in the US, you're likely to have strong opinions about Trump, good opinions and bad opinions. Sun conjunct Pluto, and you're not really prepared to compromise those opinions. And one other aspect, Mercury biquintile Jupiter. So Mercury is 144 degrees from Jupiter. Mercury is about how we communicate, and quintiles are about having some kind of inner vision, a guiding vision almost, and we somehow want to express that vision. So Mercury biquintile Jupiter may be about the idea of saying something which is dramatic or larger than life, and we really plan it and we think about it and we try to actualize it. And it may not just be about the spoken word, it can also be about the written word, what we say. We're trying to, yes, have a big impact with Mercury biquintile Jupiter. It's not entirely easy, but it certainly can be done. So don't necessarily say the first thing that comes to mind. Plan it. Work on it. A bit of work can make all the difference. I mean, it might not feel very spontaneous, but it does allow you to really target your message, and sometimes things actually do have to be planned. So that's the picture for the United States, a chart set for New York, and that has the moon at 18 degrees Libra, just moving into the Via Combustor. If you set this chart up for Sydney, Australia, moon is still in Libra at noon, but it's at 10 degrees Libra. So as far as the differences are concerned, that moon trine Jupiter is going to be stronger in Australia and New Zealand because it's going to be exact at noon. Also, the moon is not in the Via Combustor. The moon won't be in the Via Combustor until the end of the day. So that means if you are in Australia and New Zealand, it's probably going to be an easier and a luckier day than if you are in the US or in Europe. Turning to the heliocentric picture, so putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. So here we have the heliocentric chart. The Earth is, of course, in Leo now, because the Earth is always opposition. The heliocentric Earth is always opposition the geocentric Sun, so that doesn't tell us anything we don't know. Also, the Earth is opposition Pluto. By definition, Sun conjunct Pluto is the same as Earth opposition Pluto. But the heliocentric chart just gives us a different view. And I kind of like the idea of Earth opposition Pluto. It gives us the idea that we're down here on Earth and we're struggling with Pluto. We're struggling with the drama of the new. We know things are changing and we're not entirely comfortable with it. And it can be quite painful, and there may be a certain feeling of pessimism at a sort of deep collective level. And we see that pessimism not from the Earth opposition Pluto itself, but from the fact that Mercury is square Saturn. In fact, heliocentrically, we've got a T-square. We've got Mercury opposition Jupiter. There you can see Mercury in Sagittarius opposition Jupiter and opposition Venus square Saturn. So Mercury opposition Jupiter, that might be our mind running away with itself, or it could be the world's ideas, people's ideas running away with themselves. There could be a lot of hyperbole, there could be exaggerations, people saying things which they don't necessarily mean, but they feel they have to use strong, over-the-top language. And then Saturn is on the T, so Saturn is really trying to control things. And mentally, in terms of ideas and the way people are thinking, that might be the struggle that all of us are trying to feel, to try to make sense of what is happening. Now, as far as the inauguration is concerned, it's happening at the time of Trump's inauguration. As far as my own views, I don't want to come over as being biased. I have mixed feelings, but does it make any difference? My concern is my main concern, as always, is the environment. And you think that would have been better if the Democrats had won, but to be honest, environmentally, does it really matter? I just noticed that the new governor of Washington State, Democrat, they always tend to vote Democrats as their governors, has just put out some special order saying to ensure that building can just happen with as few hindrances as possible. And as far as I can see, the Democrats in Washington State, at least at the top level, couldn't care less about the environment. Just build, build, build. It's always about affordable housing. So I'm not entirely convinced that the Democrats are really too concerned about the environment. And one asks, does it really make a difference? In fact, sorry to sort of go on about this, but I'm just thinking about this, and I'm thinking that this whole concept of global warming. I believe in global warming, but I'm wondering that a man-made climate change. I do think I believe in it, but at the same time, it's so vague. People like to think about global warming and climate change, and it's just a nice thing to say, but it would be better if they talked about specific environmental issues, like this wetland in this particular area is about to be destroyed and built on. This natural habitat is going to be wiped out, is going to be clear-cut. So what you have with global warming and climate change, it's just a nice word to say. It's a nice thing for certainly cities in America to say, oh, we're looking after climate change. But are we actually doing anything about it? It's much easier to talk about climate change than a particular wetland that is going to be destroyed. And so I think that in fact, an overemphasis on global warming, it just encourages cities, certainly in the US, to come up with these platitudes. And in terms of the reality, things are just being destroyed. So it encourages people to not be specific, and it actually may facilitate the destruction of the environment, the specific destruction of the environment. This obsession with climate change, it's just a platitude, I think. Sorry, I'm going on. You're not interested in my opinions. So anyway, let's look at the 12 signs. Now, I should say with the 12 signs that astrologically there is actually not a great deal going on. And so I'm hoping that my forecasts for the 12 signs will be briefer than usual. Anyway, these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, January the 20th, 2024. Aries. Aries, you do understand that... Sorry, I just got my date wrong, by the way. It's not my forecast. These are not my forecast for 2024. It's for Monday, January the 20th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you do understand that other people matter. That you can't do everything on your own. And so you can see how outside influences can have an impact on you. This might not necessarily be something you want, but it is something you have to accept. And I think it may be the case that you have to deal with things that you hadn't fully expected. So you might think that people are going to behave in one way when they end up doing something completely different. And if you're not flexible about it, if you're very rigid and you insist that things are done in one particular way and they're not done in a particular way, then you might get flustered and you might feel that things are really brought to a standstill. But that is unnecessary. If you just make an allowance for other people and their way of doing things, and if you are to some extent tolerant, then I think that things are going to be a lot easier. And ideally, Aries, you will wait. You will wait to find out what other people want to do. See what kind of approach they're taking. And once they take a particular approach, you can then adjust your approach accordingly. And on a different note, this is the first day, full day, when the sun is in Aquarius. And of course, it happens at the same time of the year every year, though sun in Aquarius is close to the conjunction of Pluto. And with the sun in Aquarius, it's a time when the group does have some relevance to you when you are thinking about your role in the group. So whatever group you are a member of, I mean, you might feel that you're not a member of any group. I mean, Arians, after all, like to do things individually, but like it or not, you're a member of a human race. You're probably a member of some family. You've perhaps got a group of friends. At work, there are social connections if you're working. So that role is probably difficult for you to avoid, difficult for you to ignore. And the sun is making a conjunction to Pluto, and that means that today you may be more aware than usual about your group membership and perhaps also your power within the group, or your lack of power, and that would come from the sun being conjunct Pluto. Sun conjunct Pluto is always a bit of a contradictory force. On one hand, sun conjunct Pluto, one wants to be powerful. On the other hand, one can be aware of everything that is trying to take away our power. But I think, Aries, fundamentally, you can be powerful today, and you can make a big impression. Your words do matter, and the moon is making a square to Mercury, and with this moon square Mercury, there's certainly things you want to say, and I think your words will get you noticed. And if it's very important for you to make an impression, that's certainly something you can do. So don't feel, Aries, that you're being ignored. I mean, I think you might, to begin with, you might think that there's no point in saying anything because it won't be listened to. But you won't know until you try. And once you do start talking, your words will carry an enormous weight, and yes, people will listen to you. Taurus. The sun is now in Aquarius, and with the sun in Aquarius, you do have a sense of mission, maybe. The sun is not just, by the way, making in Aquarius, but it's also making a conjunction to Pluto. Okay, that conjunction may be exact today, may not be exact until tomorrow, but still, you can be aware of your power. I say can be aware of your power rather than will be aware of your power. It's up to you to an extent. If you take the view that you don't have any power, if you don't make any effort to assert yourself, if you don't make any effort to be on authority, then you might come to the conclusion that you don't have any power. But the sun conjunct Pluto does encourage you, or should encourage you, to really push yourself and to make an impact. This is really something you can do. So if you are prepared to really push it, and if you really are able to assert yourself, then I think that you can make an impression, and you can actually make quite a big impression, and there's no need to compromise. The sun in Aquarius is in a fixed sign, and that reflects you, Taurus. Taurus is a fixed sign, and once you make a decision about something, well, you can't be stopped, can you? And if you're very definite, I think that you can really move forward with your ambitions. And this is a reminder that Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto went into Aquarius on November the 17th, and it stays in Aquarius until, what's it? Is it 2043 off the top of my head, something like that? So for nearly 20 years. And so this is a time, Taurus, when you can assert yourself. For the next 20 years, and you can be very clear about what you want. And Sun conjunct Pluto is a time when you really can push it. And if you're very, very determined and you refuse to compromise, then it may actually work in your favor. I know that telling someone to refuse to compromise is not necessarily good advice. We're supposed to compromise. Compromise is a nice word, isn't it? But Taurans, when they do compromise, can get really annoyed about it. It can really upset them. And they don't say anything at the time, but afterwards, when they realize they've compromised, Taurans can get really mad at themselves. And so it may be a time when you shouldn't be compromising, when you make a decision and you go with it and you see it through to completion. Okay, that's not always good advice, but provided you're not doing anything too dangerous, too risky, then that might be the way to go. And you're able at the moment to cause change, and you can use the tools in front of you in an effective way. So whatever power you have, you can bring it together and you can leverage it. And that's another reason why you really shouldn't be doubting yourself. But for best results, preparation does matter. Preparation really is important today. Don't do anything just on the spur of a moment. Think it through. That matters. And in terms of your preparation, do remember that the moon is moving into the Via Combusta. And with the moon moving into the Via Combusta, this does mean that not everything is going to go as expected. So while Taurans can be very focused, they can be a little bit inflexible. And so if you have an absolute clear idea about how you're going to get what you want, and there's no room for error, well, then that can be a problem. So do create a little bit of flexibility in the system. And don't make assumptions about how people are going to behave or how events are going to pan out. Just be ready to change your plans at very short notice, and don't get flustered if you have to change your plans. It's a short change. It's tactical rather than strategic. It's not going to change the big idea, the larger goals. It's just on the way. You might have to reroute things, and if you're prepared for that, then I think that really would be for the best. Gemini, you may feel a little bit stressed out today. You understand that things are happening, things are going on that you don't fully understand, but you want to respond to the situation. And this is to do with the fact that we have a T-square. We have Moon opposition Chiron with Mercury on the T, and Moon opposition Chiron. As far as you're concerned, might be your awareness of what's happening around you, and you pick up on what other people are doing, what other people are thinking. And with Moon opposition Chiron, not everyone is happy. Some people might quite literally feel quite wounded by whatever's going on, and you somehow have to make sense of it all and maybe come up with a solution. It seems difficult to come up with a solution. You may feel it's just impossible, but if you actually look at what's bothering people and you listen to what's bothering them, and you then work on it, you can, in terms of the depths of who you are and the depths of your emotions even. I mean, I know that Gemini doesn't necessarily have a reputation for being a super emotional sign, but you may get some emotional insights which could provide some solutions. So that is possible. And at the same time, Gemini, you may feel a certain estrangement from what is happening around you. And the reason for this estrangement is the fact that, heliocentrically, we've got an opposition between Mercury and Jupiter, and Mercury is square Saturn. This is heliocentrically. And that Jupiter-Saturn pairing can be about what's happening around you, what's happening in society, the way the world is going, and you, Gemini, may feel just a little bit separate from it all, and that might be somewhat disturbing, but hopefully you'll just understand things and not get too upset about it, and maybe not take it too personally, because things are going on, the world is changing, and there is a conjunction between the Sun and Pluto in Aquarius. Okay, that conjunction isn't exact until tomorrow, but with the Sun in Aquarius, Gemini, you should maybe be trying to get some distance, not taking things too personally. Because at the moment there is a danger that Geminis do take things uncharacteristically personally. But if you don't take things too personally, if you can get some kind of perspective on things and be detached from it, detachment does matter. And you can think about time. 1 year might seem a long time, but really 1 year is nothing. 4 years even, I suppose, if you're concerned about politics, 4 years. 4 years can fly. 8 years can fly. Before you know it, the Democrats will be back in office. You might have to wait 8 years, but what's 8 years? I mean, I'm not giving any particular view. I must make that clear. I'm ambivalent. And also, Gemini, you need to tap into your sense of freedom. And freedom may be about freeing yourself from what is happening around you. And it seems that you can get too emotionally involved with these global events. And I'm not just talking about what's happening in the US. I mean, your emotional involvement, by the way, in terms of what's happening in the US may not be negative, may be very positive. You may be emotionally delighted that your fellow Gemini is becoming president. But delight is attachment as well. Delight and despair are both forms of attachment, and they're not really helpful. You need some distance, and you should be trying to free yourself from all of this. And this is something you can do. And many Geminis may, in the end today, feel a certain sense of relief. that perhaps you've taken something too seriously and you realize it's just not a big deal. Or in certain situations, Gemini, it actually could be a situation where you were quite worried about something. It was really bothering you, and you get some news, or you have a realization, or someone tells you something, and you realize, actually, it wasn't a big deal at all. It was nothing to worry about. Hence, Gemini, a feeling that there is an escape, but you have escaped something, and you can now relax. And relaxation is possible. I mean, it could be a little bit difficult, but if you want to have a relaxed day, detachment does matter. And it's going back to what I said about the sun being in Aquarius. Now that the sun is in Aquarius, now that the sun is in a Gemini-friendly sign, you can get some distance, certainly emotional distance, and you can see things in perspective. And I think that is the major lesson for today, Gemini. Get things in perspective. Cancer. Cancer, it's a day which on the surface does seem busy. There's a lot going on. There's certainly a lot going on in a sort of a global sense, and other people might be frenetic, but does it really affect you? I'm not really convinced that it does. I think Cancer, you can withdraw to an extent, and you don't have to be involved, and you can certainly observe what other people are doing, but it doesn't have to be part of you. And in fact, the more you do things on your own, in your own way, I would have said, the better. I mean, it's all about you feeling comfortable, and I think at the moment that does matter. And you have to also, Cancer, be aware of things that might actually make you feel uncomfortable. So what could make you feel uncomfortable is the things other people say. People could say things which they don't necessarily mean, or alternatively, they might be overexcited or over-concerned and say things without really thinking about it. And do you really want to have to worry about it or bother with it? And it may be the case, Cancer, that you should simply be avoiding people that talk too much. But if you do start paying attention to anyone or anything, then you might actually be walking into a trap. A time trap, that is. I mean, not a trap where anything terrible is going to happen. But as soon as you start to engage, you're going to engage more and more. And this is because the moon is making an opposition to Chiron, it's making a square to Mercury. And so that Mercury square Chiron, which the moon is moving into, is the distraction. And this means that you should try to have your eyes open today. If you don't want to be distracted, if you want to have a quiet day, then you do have to not engage. Now, you may feel that you don't want to have a quiet day. You may feel a certain sense of obligation, in which case that Mercury square Chiron is waiting for you. You start talking to people, you start finding out what's happening, and this forces you to take action. This forces you to get involved. And I don't think you're going to get involved willingly, but it just may be a sense of obligation, because you might just feel that you're just part of something. It's inaction. I mean, it is not inaction, but it's in action, and it's got a will of its own. It's got a momentum of its own, and once you're involved, There's really not much you can do. So in that sense, Cancer, I would have said that you have something of a choice. But you have to be clear about that choice as early as possible. Make that decision. Do you want to get involved, or do you want to not get involved? Which is better? Well, from a selfish perspective, a purely selfish perspective, in terms of your own selfish interests, then probably the less you have to do with anything, the better. I don't think that the outside world is going to provide you with any great advantages, any great opportunities, especially as you've got things that you actually want to do, that you want to attend to. You don't actually need anyone's help, and if you work on them, you'll do a good job, and things will develop nicely. If you engage with other people, well, it's almost an act of altruism. You may be able to make a difference. You can perhaps make people feel better about themselves, but in the process, it might feel quite exhausting. I mean, not totally exhausting, but it just may be something that you just have to do. And I should make one point about the Sun in Aquarius and the Sun conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. That conjunction between the Sun and Pluto, which is exact tomorrow, does reinforce the idea that you can do your best work alone, really on your terms. And it might be the case that today you feel that you have to postpone your best work because of outside distractions. But if you don't postpone things, and if you decide that it's going to be a day that's all about you, then maybe that you can start to tune into that Sun conjunct Pluto and the fact that the Sun is now in Aquarius, and with the Sun in Aquarius, it's often a time when Cancerians don't want to be too heavily involved. Aquarius is a sign which is fairly introspective, from a Cancerian perspective, and you want to work things out in your own way, and it may take you a bit of time. And that Sun conjunct Pluto gives you the impetus to work on things. I mean, and I'm not just talking about things that are vague. It may be something connected with money. So from a financial perspective, Cancer, there might be something that you really want to look at in your own way and not be distracted by other people and their problems. But whatever happens today, Cancer, I do think to a great extent it is your choice. Leo, the Sun is in Aquarius, very much in Aquarius today. This is the first day, Aquarius, where it's in this, where it's going to be where the Sun is going to be in your opposite sign all day long, and with the Sun making a conjunction to Pluto, it does put some emphasis on the other, and the idea that other people may have a fair amount of power. I mean, you may not be entirely happy with the situation, but if you're honest, you'll accept the fact that you're not in full control. And if you think about it, the Sun is your ruler, and the Sun rules Leo. So when it's in the sign Aquarius, Aquarius is very much the anti-Leo. It's not a time, Leo, to be thinking about your ego and you being the center of attention. It's a time for getting a different view and not being upset if you're not in full control, especially with Sun conjunct Pluto. And the trouble with Sun conjunct Pluto is that you may tell yourself stories You might tell yourself stories that you are being undermined, that you're not being given the power and the respect that you need. And there is a danger of projection. So if things don't go entirely your way, then you might blame other people. It's their fault that things aren't going your way, when in fact it's maybe something to do with you. It may be just something to do with your short-term destiny and the way it's unfolding. You can't expect to be in control all the time, and you have to just accept that people sometimes have to be listened to. But there's plenty you've got to say. I mean, I don't think you'll have any difficulty getting your message across. I mean, the moon is making a square to Mercury. Moon square Mercury is a fairly communicative aspect, but if you are saying things, don't just say things for the sake of it, just because you want to be heard. Make sure you're saying something that is important, that you've worked it through, and you've made absolutely sure that you've got your facts right. And that could take some preparation, working on it, perhaps doing some research, not jumping to conclusions. And that really is the way forward. And also taking into account other people's needs. You might feel that your needs are what matter. I mean, maybe that's just sort of a natural Leo trait. No, it's not. It's not really a natural Leo trait. I mean, it's maybe more of a stereotypical trait that the astrology books talk about. But there's no reason why Leos should be particularly selfish. But the difference, as I've already tried to explain with the Sun opposition Pluto, the difference between the self and the other may be particularly stark today. And when you're trying to interact with the world, you find that you're having to deal with something that is perhaps quite complicated, and that may just be the complication of other people actually having needs. You realize they've got needs. I mean, you don't perhaps want to realize they've got needs, but they have got needs, and it may be that actually some people are suffering. I mean, there is an opposition between the moon and Chiron that you're trying to work through. And Mercury is on the T, so you've got Mercury, moon square Mercury, moon square Chiron. And so that's about you trying to work it out and not saying the first thing that comes to mind, and even doing some research. It could be that it's a day when some people just can't work it out for themselves, and they need you to work it out for them. Maybe something like looking something up on the internet, looking something up in a library. I think in America the libraries are going to be closed because it's a holiday, isn't it? It's Martin Luther King Day. But whatever ways you have to look up things, to research things, well, take advantage of them, because people are looking for information to make themselves feel better. And I think that you can actually find that information. And in fact, in the process of trying to help people, it may not be something you want to do, but in the process of doing this, Leo, you might start to tune into your own abilities, and you find that by not thinking about other people, you're actually able to tune into something that's very important and unique about you, which maybe you'd forgotten about. So in the end, by helping other people, you'll be helping yourself. Virgo, we have a square aspect between the moon and Mercury, and In fact, the moon is opposition Chiron, and so we've got Mercury on the T, as we say. It's because we've got a T square. Moon opposition Chiron with Mercury on the T, and so there is a little bit of agitation today. There are things that you are thinking about, worrying about. You'd like not to think about them, but you are, and it might relate to money. With this moon square Mercury, you may feel that there's some financial issue that you just can't help thinking about. You just keep focusing on it, and it may be a little bit undermining, but you just can't stop. You're thinking about it all the time, and it could take up all of your energy if you're not careful. So I would be wary of anything to do with money, because objectively money may not be especially important right now, but you could make it important. And there is a possibility that relatively small amounts of money take up a very large amount of your attention. So do be aware of that possibility, and don't get caught. Don't get trapped. And maybe one reason why small details could take up so much of your attention is because you might be trying to avoid the bigger picture. You want to make things simple for yourself, so you want to focus on some everyday complication like money. What you maybe don't want to do is look at the wider picture. And here we see the distinction between the geocentric chart and the heliocentric chart. So in the geocentric chart, moon is square Mercury. That could be a concern about money, but in the heliocentric chart, we have Mercury opposition Jupiter. We have Mercury square Saturn. Mercury feeds into a heliocentric Jupiter-Saturn square, and the heliocentric chart is maybe a challenge for you, which perhaps you're trying to avoid. And the heliocentric chart is something quite collective, and it's asking you to think about the collective and what's happening around you, what's happening in society. And it's not just about the fact that America has a new president. If you're not in America, there are probably things going on in your own country, in your own community, which you probably need to take notice of, but you maybe don't want to take notice of them. It's kind of easier to focus on your own interests, or your own concerns. It may be about worry, but at least it's straightforward worry, easy worries. How much money you've got in the bank, how much cash you've got. This kind of thing does make it nice and straightforward for you. So try, if you can, to think about everything and see the connectedness of it all. I think that really is very important. And don't get stuck. Part of you just seems to want to get stuck. Part of you almost wants to worry about something small for the sake of it, because it's somehow safe. Yet if you actually look at things and you really work things through, there may be, in the end, a sense of release. If you just open your eyes and open your heart, you might actually reach a stage today where you realize that things aren't as bad as they seem. In fact, better than that something you thought was a problem isn't a problem at all. And that can be a real relief. You feel just a release and just letting it all go and not getting caught up in any one thing. And yeah, in the end, Virgo, you can just feel freedom. And freedom really should be what you should be focusing on today. Free from your own concerns, free from concerns about what's happening in the world. Now, in terms of what's happening in the world, you shouldn't trivialize it. You need to accept what's happening in the world, but not feel that it's personalized. This is the world in which you live. There's always drama. Throughout human history, there's drama. It always happens. And it is at the moment just very important that you don't take it personally. And you just want to move beyond that. And the aspect that you should really be trying to tune into is a biquintile between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury and Jupiter are 144 degrees apart, and it could be argued, certainly from a Virgo perspective, that the Mercury-Jupiter biquintile is the most important aspect of the day. And it's about your vision. Jupiter is about something which goes beyond yourself, and it's also very optimistic. So privately, in terms of your own thoughts, allow yourself to be optimistic. Allow yourself to consider what things might be like if everything worked to plan. Now, you might have your doubts about anything working to plan. You might start with a view that nothing is working to plan. But just pretend. Just allow your thoughts to wander. Consider what would happen if everything worked in a way that was exactly right. And then consider the possibility of it actually happening. So you have a vision that things can work to plan, that your crazy optimism can actually be realized, and then work on it. Start making it actually happen in the real world and see what happens. It may not be that you'll get exactly what you want, but to your surprise, Virgo, you may actually end up getting a lot of what you want. But you do have to start off with an idea and not just reject the idea because it seems unrealistic. You have to give it your best. And I think if you do give it your best, I think in the end you will be rewarded. Libra. Libra, the moon continues to move through your sign, and so with the moon moving through Libra, you're very aware of who you are and what you can do, and also you're aware of what the constraints are, and some of those constraints may relate to other people. And I think, Libra, you're going to be acutely aware of your responsibilities to other people. I mean, even if you don't have to be responsible, if no one's really expecting you to look after people, I think you are aware of this responsibility, and that's connected with the fact that today there is an opposition aspect between the moon and Chiron. So moon opposition Chiron might make you acutely aware of other people and what's bothering them. I mean, we could take this further. It could be about other people's suffering, other people's wounds, and if anyone can pick up on this suffering, I think it's you. And that means that if you just did things your own way and you try to ignore other people, you'd still feel a bit guilty about it. Now, you don't want to feel too guilty, and guilt can be an issue that can make Librans' life difficult. I mean, Libra is a sociable sign. Libra wants balance, and if someone is hurting or someone is crying for attention, you want to do something about it. And so that moon opposition Chiron may upset your balance, but that moon opposition Chiron is squared by Mercury. So we have a T-square today. Moon opposition Chiron with Mercury on the T. And Mercury might represent some kind of a solution. So Mercury could perhaps be allowing you to make sense of things in your own way, and having made sense of things, coming up with grounded solutions. And that's perhaps what people want, or rather what people need. People might want loads of attention, but you haven't got the capacity to give people all the attention you've got, because then you would exhaust yourself. What you can offer is grounded solutions, and solutions which you can come up with very quickly. So if someone is in need, someone needs help, you're going to be very good at telling them what they need to do. Now, they might not listen to your advice, or they might want more, but don't take things too far. You've only got so much energy. So if someone wants to ignore your advice, well, you could say, well, that is simply their problem, and just leave it at that. So give people something, but don't give people everything. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, there is still a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Obviously, we don't see the Venus-Jupiter conjunction in the geocentric chart, but it's there in the heliocentric chart. And that conjunction between Venus and Jupiter is quite fortunate, and it may not be as directly accessible as a geocentric conjunction, but with that heliocentric conjunction, it perhaps allows you to get a sense of what you're supposed to be doing and where you fit in. What your role is in society, perhaps. And if you allow yourself to, you can actually feel very good about it. And if you really consider what you can do, then you'll realize that you've got something very special to offer, and that should actually make you feel quite optimistic about the future. You understand that things aren't all wonderful. Venus is making, heliocentrically, Venus is making a square to Saturn, and you understand that nothing is entirely simple. But as far as you're concerned with that Venus conjunct Jupiter, there is just a sense that you're able to get over most obstacles, and through your optimism, Libra, you really can move a long way. Now, one event which I haven't talked about specifically, one reason for that is because I was going to do the readings for the 12 signs for the weekend, but I had a technical problem, so I didn't have that video when I would have talked about what it would mean for Libra, for the sun to be in Aquarius. But I never actually got around to talking about that. But the sun is moving into Aquarius. It is in Aquarius today. I mean, it may have gone into Aquarius yesterday, or could be today. Depends on your time zone. But sun moving into Aquarius, Libra, that is good news. Sun, Aquarius, it's an air sign. You're an air sign. It's a part of the sky, part of the zodiac, which is really very creative, and it's independently creative. So, over the next few weeks, you have a chance to really tune into your creativity, but in a way that you mustn't compromise. And again, we've just got Sun conjunct Pluto. The Sun conjunct Pluto in Aquarius is not about compromising who you are. It's not about compromising your abilities and your potential and even your destiny. We're given creativity for a reason, and it's part of our destiny. And if we ignore that destiny, or we give in to outside pressure, that's not helpful. So perhaps, Libra, do think about your creativity and be very independent-minded about it. Don't listen too much to other people. Sure, you might spend some of the day listening to other people and their problems, but it mustn't overwhelm you. And over the next few weeks, just be as independent as you can. And as far as today is concerned, there's almost a grand trine feel to today. Almost. It's just the moon is kind of making a trine to Jupiter. The moon is, making a very wide trine to Pluto. I think that grand trine is more about the weekend, but I think you might still feel the after effects of that grand trine in air signs, moon, Pluto, Jupiter. And that grand trine, which I think was exact over the weekend, is fortunate. And it just reminds you, or should be reminding you, of what you can do, and what can make you special. So in terms of yourself and what you can do, you do need to put yourself first over the next few weeks. Scorpio, there's still a lot of activity in Libra. Moon solidly in Libra, and that means that the moon is not in Scorpio yet. And while the moon is in Libra, you may feel that you're not ready to take on the world. You can see that things are happening. Certainly if you're in America, you can see that things are happening. But it does feel a little bit distant. Indeed, it probably should be feeling a little bit distant. And you don't want to be in a position where you are taking things personally, especially if you can't control them. And so it's a good idea, Scorpio, to just be focusing on what is important to you. And it's not just the fact that we've got the moon moving through Libra. We've also got a conjunction between the Sun and Pluto in Aquarius. Now, this Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, it's not exact until tomorrow, but it's still a very relevant aspect. And it is at the bottom of your chart in Aquarius. It's very personal. And you may be thinking about the changes that are happening around you, and also the changes that are happening to you. And it's not necessarily something you want to discuss, and you may just want to stay where you are and just take it all in. And it may take time to take it in. And in a longer term perspective, while the sun is moving through Aquarius, between now and whatever, around February the 19th, it is often a time where Scorpios feel that they want to work things out on their own. They may even feel they need to be left alone. But don't forget about your family with this Sun conjunct Pluto. With the Sun conjunct Pluto, you may actually want to give domestic and family matters a lot of your attention, which would be good provided you don't take things too far. Sun conjunct Pluto does have a certain obsessive quality. So if you obsess about what is happening in your home or what your family are doing, then you might take things too far, and that might actually disturb your peace of mind. And Scorpio, if there's anything you're not happy about, and I'm thinking particularly about your home and your family, but it might be something else. If there's anything you're not happy about, then don't feel that you have to keep it to yourself. If you really want to be, you can actually be quite influential. People will listen to what you have to say. You might not want to say it, but if you do say it, you will have an immediate audience. And it's actually a day, Scorpio, where you can actually change hearts and minds through the power of your personality. So Scorpio, don't underestimate yourself. If you want to be, you can be extremely powerful. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, we looked at the heliocentric chart, and the heliocentric chart, if you remember, it showed that Mercury was opposition Jupiter and Jupiter was square Saturn, and in fact we had a T-square. We had Mercury opposition Jupiter with Saturn on the T. So Mercury opposite that heliocentric Mercury opposition Jupiter is quite powerful, and it's really stirring up your thoughts. You do have a lot to think about with this Mercury opposition Jupiter, and you know that a lot of things going on are of great significance and can't be ignored, and they may be troubling you, because Sagittarius at the moment, once you start thinking about something, you may not be able to stop. But thinking about something just for the sake of it is not particularly healthy, is it? I mean, you just go round and round and round, thinking, and at some stage you run out of steam. Or if we think about that T-square from the heliocentric configuration, Saturn is square Mercury, Saturn is square Jupiter, and that might be about you needing to get a grip, looking at what you're thinking about and saying, well, either you do something about it or you stop thinking about it. There's no point in thinking about it just for the sake of it. So that's a heliocentric picture, which is somewhat abstract, because the trouble with the heliocentric chart is there's no moon in the heliocentric chart because the Earth and the moon are in the same place, and also it is quite collective, and so it's best if we can try to relate things to the geocentric chart. And geocentrically, we have a biquintile between Mercury and Jupiter. So heliocentrically, we've got Mercury-Jupiter opposition. Geocentrically, we've got the Mercury biquintile Jupiter. Now, that biquintile is easier to make sense of, I think, and the biquintile is what you're trying to create, what you're trying to put into action. And so Mercury biquintile Jupiter is about you having ideas about yourself and what you can do and what you'd like to do, and allowing them to crystallize. The biquintile is about creating something and then working out how to put it into action. And so you might start to have ideas, and then with these ideas you realize what you want, what you'd like to be, what you'd like to do, and then you can actually start to really make it happen. So it's important, Sagittarius, that you don't doubt yourself, and that you don't allow ideas to get wasted, or worse still, to just take up a lot of your attention with no gain, no benefit. It's just hot air. That's absolutely what you don't want to happen. But if you can make sense of your ideas and focus on these ideas, then I think that you can start to make progress. And we see this in other parts of the chart. There is a Sun-Pluto conjunction, and this Sun-Pluto conjunction, it can be obsessive, but it can also be very focused. You focus on what your thoughts are. You take your thoughts extremely seriously, and you think, no, this can happen, and you can actually be some kind of agent for change. Because if you're honest with yourself, you realize that change is required, and you also realize that if change is going to happen, you're the only person that can actually make it happen. So Sagittarius, that might give you a special role, and that raises the question of how you create change. And change is not something you necessarily have to do on your own, especially with Jupiter being in Gemini in your opposite sign. So you have to make some effort to understand other people, understand how far other people are going to go, also understand people's tolerance levels. And so that way, by showing some sympathy, then you can start to change your message ever so slightly, and give people some of what they want, not all of what they want, because you've got to consider your needs. But if you can get that balance right, then you can bring everyone on board, and you can create real change. And I think it'll be a change that's in everyone's best interests. Capricorn, I think it's quite important for you to get noticed. I mean, it can be a little bit difficult to get noticed because perhaps you're not prepared to give things everything you've got. You seem to be holding something back. But if you do want to get noticed, you have to give it everything you've got, and you've got to have a sense of what is important. And if you don't focus on the right things, and you have a sort of a fairly vague approach, then you're not really going to get anywhere. So you've got to make up your mind what's important, and then yes, give it everything. And if you do give it everything, then quite quickly you will get the attention that you deserve. And once you get that attention, I do think that people are going to listen to you, and it will be quite clear that you are someone who has a lot of power at their disposal, and you're someone who will get noticed. And if you have an idea, people will listen to that idea, but you can't be half-hearted about it. And it just does seem today that many Capricorns could be somewhat half-hearted. You're just not prepared to give it everything, and that might be just the way you feel. I think that in America it's a holiday, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's Martin Luther King Day. So in the United States, there may not be the opportunity because things are a bit quiet. But still, wherever you are, if you're prepared to really make things happen, and you concentrate on the things that matter to you, then you can have an impact. And don't forget about money, because the Sun is now in Aquarius, and the Sun is making a conjunction to Pluto. And Sun conjunct Pluto can be quite an obsessive aspect, and in Aquarius there is a financial dimension there. And so some Capricorns may be very concerned about money, and they may find themselves putting more energy into money than they'd expected. Perhaps something happens that makes you think that money is important, or you may be responding to other people's concerns, but what you have is going to be important to you. And it can work in several ways, because the Sun is conjunct Pluto, and Pluto is about transformation and getting a different perspective on money. So it might be not that you are really concerned about maintaining money, but you could change your attitude to money. Money might suddenly become less important. I mean, it could become more important. But whichever way it goes, money could be an issue. And you just need to make sure that you handle it in the right way. And you don't be ashamed if you find yourself concentrating on money. I mean, it doesn't sound, such a nice thing to have to spend all day worrying about money, but you might. And I mean, worrying about money, it's not that you have to just worry about money just as some kind of self-torture. It could be that it's just something that needs to be addressed, and something you need to think about. But whatever happens, Capricorn, you're able to sort of transform your perspective, and also perhaps you may be able to transform other people's perspective, which could be a really good thing. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, and I'm talking about the heliocentric picture in some respects because geocentrically there isn't a great deal going on. Heliocentrically, we have an opposition aspect between Mercury and Jupiter, and we have Saturn on the T. So Mercury is square Saturn, Mercury is square Jupiter, and Saturn is, of course, your ruler. So Mercury opposition Jupiter may be a situation where there is a lot of talking and a lot of thinking, and it could be going absolutely nowhere. At least it could go nowhere if nothing is done about it. People talking, people planning, but it's just goes round and round in circles. But Saturn is on the T. Saturn is the answer, and Saturn may be you. And this might mean, Capricorn, that you find yourself in a situation where there is chaos, maybe mental chaos, people talking at cross purposes, people having different ideas, people getting worried about things for no reason at all. And Saturn can come in and sort everything out. And that heliocentric T-square does indicate that in a Capricorn way, you can adopt some kind of leadership, which goes back to what I was saying with the moon in Libra. If you are focused, you can lead, you can be taken seriously. And part of what you're doing is you're taking a chaotic situation, Mercury opposition Jupiter, and you're turning it into something real, and you're tuning into your own power, and you're bringing things together, and you're taking a difficult situation and you're creating order and structure. Aquarius, I didn't really get a chance to talk about the sun moving into your sign. I was going to say that over the weekend, but my video for the weekend got really truncated because of technical problems. So the reminder, sun is now in Aquarius. The Aquarius season has started, and this is a great time for Aquarians. And the first thing that happens when the sun moves into Aquarius is that it makes a conjunction to Pluto. And this conjunction to Pluto is exact tomorrow, but today it's really close, and you are starting to feel it. And so with Sun-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, I do think that puts you in a very strong position, and you're not going to get ignored, and you'll have a very, very clear sense of who you are, what you want to achieve, and also who you are not. that is important. It's not just about who you are. All the things you're not. Maybe you were in the past, but you've moved on, and so with this Sun conjunct Pluto, it's a very good time to be defining yourself, and you don't have to do things that you don't want to do, and this means that you should have a strong sense of responsibility to yourself, to do what's important. And as far as other people are concerned, I think in many cases you do have a lot of power, and if anyone's going to compromise, it does seem that it's other people that will have to compromise. Other people will have to do things your way. They'll have to sort of move onto your territory. We can see this quite literally if you look at the chart, because as an Aquarius, Leo is your opposite sign, and the ruler of Leo is the Sun, and the Sun is in Aquarius, and the Sun is conjunct Pluto. So that might indicate someone who does things your way and who might actually be quite overwhelmed by you. And that's another reason to show responsibility. You've got to show responsibility in terms of understanding what kind of power you have. You might have actually more power than you realize, and you don't want to be in a position where you misuse that power, or you just forget about that power. So do make a special effort to look after people's interests and not do things your way all the time, because yes, it really is true that some people might be overwhelmed, and also try to get some kind of perspective, because we've got the moon's moving through Libra, and Libra is a sign which is about getting a perspective, not getting too close to things. I mean, with Sun conjunct Pluto, you could get too close to something and not get an all-important perspective. But the moon in Libra does allow you to sort of step back and see how it all fits together. And once you start to see how it all fits together, then you can start to look at yourself, you can look at other people, and look at the society around you, and realize that everyone has their role, and some people do need to be listened to, or at least appreciated. It's not all about you. And finally, I wanted to say something about the heliocentric chart. Now, I did look at the heliocentric chart towards the beginning of this video, and heliocentrically we had Mercury opposition Jupiter, and we had Saturn on the T, and I was talking about this T square to Capricorn, and so it's a similar message here. So Mercury opposition Jupiter might be about a lot of ideas. It may be also a lot of worries. People going around in circles, worrying about what's going to happen, being very uncertain, being very unsure of themselves. And Saturn is the controlling element, and Saturn is you. And if other people don't know what's happening, they don't know what to do, they're worrying, you, Aquarius, can really step in and get a perspective. And perspective is what matters, because some people get too close to things. Okay, it might be you getting too close to things as well, but there's no need to get too close to things, with the moon in Libra. So you can get this perspective, and I think you can pass on this perspective to other people, and in the process you can make them feel a whole lot better about whatever is going on around them. Pisces, the Sun is in Aquarius now, and this means that there is 1 month before the Pisces season starts. And with the sun in Aquarius, in this lead up to the sun moving into Pisces, obviously Aquarius is the sign before Pisces, it can be a time when you need to not feel that you really have to be in the center of things. You might actually take the view that it might be best to an extent to withdraw. I mean, not entirely withdraw, but you don't want to be emotionally caught up in everything. And with the sun in Aquarius, it's a time for a degree of objectivity, and you can't be objective if you're really close to things. And so, between now and mid to late February, as the sun moves into Aquarius, getting a bit of distance might actually be a very good idea. And this also reflects the fact that Jupiter is in Gemini, and with Jupiter in Gemini, you're thinking about the basis of who you are and what your plans are, and also what does it mean, this concept of stability. And that's something you should perhaps be thinking about. It's not necessarily the case that you have to always be doing stuff. You don't have to always be doing stuff. Because right now there are many indicators that you are not at the center of things, that you are on the periphery. And I think that this is where you are probably happiest. And you still understand that big changes are afoot. I mean, you absolutely get it, and you perhaps see that the world is never going to be the same again. I mean, you don't have to take it personally, though, but you're just aware. You pick up on it all. I mean, you're a sensitive Pisces, after all, and it's just important that you don't overthink it. We looked at the heliocentric chart, and heliocentrically, Mercury is opposition Jupiter. And so Mercury opposition Jupiter, with this aspect, Pisces, you may be picking up on many of the concerns that other people have, not just the people close to you, but the people in society around you, what they're having. You are picking up on it, and it is to an extent having an impact on your peace of mind. And you're thinking what everyone else is thinking. That is often the case. You find yourself thinking about something and worrying about something, and you think you're the only person on the planet that's worrying about it. In fact, everyone may be worrying about the same thing. So don't personalize your worries. Just perhaps regard yourself as being a thermometer or a thermostat. You're just tuning into the temperature, and you're reflecting the temperature. And it's just very important that you don't take it personally. And really, that's all there is to be said. It is quite an intense day, but I think it's also quite a private day. I don't think that you have to be here, there, and everywhere. And if you can just be safe, withdraw into your own world, not withdraw in a negative way, but just tune into your own space. I mean, you are sensitive. It's not like you're cutting down lines of communication. Those lines of communication are completely open on so many levels, including the emotional and perhaps even the psychic level. So you do get it all, but it just might be, Pisces, a time for a degree of reflection. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 50. Now, this hexagram, which is the cauldron, has no moving lines. And in a way, this sort of reflects the astrology, because when we've got a hexagram with no moving lines, it does indicate that not a great deal is going on. There is no action, because when you've got movement, you've got moving line, you've got action. And astrologically, things were a bit sparse. I know we've got this big event with Donald Trump being inaugurated president. And yeah, that certainly is a big event. It's not like nothing is going to happen over the next 4 years. And I will be looking at the inauguration chart in detail in a moment. But as far as today is concerned, don't feel it's going to be super active. And then we have to think about 50, the cauldron. What does that actually mean? And the cauldron is about bringing together your talents. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. The cauldron is something quite magical. It is a vessel, but a very special vessel of religious and ceremonial importance. And we don't just put things into the cauldron just to, as a way of storage. We put into the cauldron everything that we are, and we try to make sense of it. And I think the cauldron, this hexagram, kind of reflects the aspect we've got, which is a biquintile between Mercury and Jupiter. So a biquintile is, in a way, quite a forced aspect. We are trying to make something happen. Mercury, biquintile Jupiter, was about our ideas, perhaps, and we're trying to turn our ideas into something real, and we're trying to be optimistic, and we can turn our positivity into reality, but we have to really work on it. And it's the same thing with the cauldron. We bring together everything that we are, and we create something, and there is some kind of transformation. And this hexagram, the cauldron, is about alchemy. It can be about alchemy, changing lead into gold. And we might think that we can't do it, we're not up to it, but if we actually work on who we are, then we can get results. But we shouldn't forget that there are no moving lines. So actually seeing it through may be hard work, and perhaps we should need to wait for another day. We can see who we are, we can see all of our potential, but with that lack of moving lines, we might not be able to see it through. Now, there is a nuclear hexagram, and when I do have a hexagram that doesn't move, I just think it's kind of worth looking at the nuclear hexagram, the hexagram in the middle. So if you knock off the top and bottom lines, you'll see that we get to this hexagram 43, and this is the underlying picture. And it may be that what we're really striving for is some kind of breakthrough. I mean, that's what we're looking for, but we're not able to find that breakthrough. And alternative way of looking at this hexagram 43 is about being in a situation where we have to escape. I mean, Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching, I think he calls this hexagram not breakthrough, he calls it flight. And there's something we're trying to escape from. We know our situation is not great, and we have to move from one place to another. I mean, I'm not saying your situation is not great. Remember, this is a nuclear hexagram. It's the underlying picture. And it just gives some added information about the main hexagram. And so with hexagram 50, okay, it may not be that we're trying to escape, but we're trying to transform ourselves from one thing to another. And it's a transformation that is in process, and it's slow, and maybe if you think about chemical reactions, maybe it's cold. I mean, okay, you may be listening to this from a southern hemisphere. It could be the Australian summer, but where I am, it's cold. It's the Pacific Northwest, and so when things are cold, chemical reactions are slower, and that might be what's going on with the cauldron. But things are in place. It just may require a little bit more effort to see them through. And that's it. So it's not a dramatic hexagram, the cauldron, because it's locked. I mean, the cauldron is a dramatic hexagram, but it's locked. So we can't expect immediate results. And yeah, I think it is, to an extent, work in progress. So let me now look at the inauguration of Donald Trump. So the inauguration is the precise moment when Donald Trump becomes president. Indeed, it's a precise moment when any president comes into being. Now, there are other things going on. There's the oath of office, but my understanding of the American Constitution, I mean, not that I know much about the American Constitution, but my understanding of the American Constitution says that at the stroke of midday on the 20th, I mean, it's the 21st, I think, if the 20th falls on a Sunday. I got that right. But at the stroke of midday, legally, the new president takes office. He becomes president. And astrologically, we would be of the view that that is an incredibly important moment. He is president. It's the beginning of the new term of office, and so we can perhaps judge the inauguration chart and say something about how that presidency is going to work out. Now, since the 1930s, the president, well, late 1930s, I'm not sure about which, either was 1941, the 1941 inauguration, or it could have been the 1937 inauguration, but one of those two, they switched the day. Traditionally, it used to be March the 4th when the new president took office. So there was a very long period of time between the president being elected and him becoming president. But in the 30s, or the late 30s, early 40s, I think it was the late 30s, they switched from March the 4th to January the 20th. And so, you know, we need to realize that means that inauguration charts will have certain things in common, because if it's always January the 20th at noon, you're always going to get the same features of a chart unless the time zones change. So let me just show you what I mean. So here's the chart for the inauguration of Donald Trump. 14 Taurus is rising and 26 Capricorn is on the midheaven, and the sun is at 0 degrees Aquarius. That is always the case. So if you look at the inauguration of Joe Biden in 2021, again, we've got 14 Taurus rising, 26 Capricorn on the midheaven, and the sun at 0 degrees Aquarius. So that's always going to be the case. But the other planets will move around, and so we will see differences. And I wanted to start off by looking at a few sort of past inauguration charts to see if these inauguration charts really have said something about the term in office. So this is Joe Biden's inauguration chart in 2021. I was always of the view that this chart was totally disastrous. And I mean, I'm recording this at just before 7 in the morning on a Sunday, so there's just a bit less than 24 hours left as at the time of recording of Joe Biden's presidency. So I'm assuming nothing new is going to happen. So this this presidency, Joe Biden's presidency, it started with a Mars-Uranus conjunction, and an exact Mars-Uranus conjunction, which was square Saturn and square Jupiter. So do you think that worked? Now, you could associate Mars-Uranus conjunction with war, and one of the big things about Biden's presidency has been the war with Russia. America and NATO's war against Russia, with obviously with Ukraine as a proxy, but it was fundamentally a war against Russia, and that I suppose has been a feature of Biden's presidency. Mars conjunct Uranus. The war, well, it depends on who you read about how well this war has gone, but I think the general consensus outside the mainstream media is that the war has gone very badly for America, and Russia is winning. So you could say that Mars conjunct Uranus didn't really work too well, and you can see Mars square Saturn and the sort of frustrations about it. But it's not just about the war against Russia. It's also the fact that internally, Biden himself was prevented from standing again, and in the end, this presidency kind of ended in great disappointment with Kamala taking over from Biden as a candidate, and then Kamala losing. So it's not a happy chart, though I would probably argue that this chart was a very dramatic chart. But I know it's been the last 4 years have been difficult, but maybe the last 4 years haven't been quite as catastrophic as this chart would predict. Now, turning to another inauguration, I want to go back. You know me. I always like to look at things from a historical perspective, and there is FDR's inauguration in 1941. So FDR was elected president in 1932. So there were no term limits on there at that time. So this was when he was standing for his third presidency, and so this chart was on the eve of the Second World War, and Moon was at 4 Scorpio, so square Pluto, square the Sun. So you could say in this chart that this indicated something quite dramatic. It wasn't just that. It was Moon was opposition Saturn, Moon was square the Sun, Moon was square Pluto. So this was quite a dramatic chart, I would have said. And of course, the two big things that happened were Pearl Harbor and the fact that FDR didn't complete his term. Is that right? No, he did complete his term. Hold on. Sorry, he did complete his term. Sorry, he was actually re-elected in 1940. He was re-elected in 1944. So we would have had to have looked at the 1945 inauguration, I think. Is that right? To see evidence of his death. So he completed his term, but it was the time of the Second World War. It was Pearl Harbor. It was a day of infamy, and so I think we see that to an extent in this chart with Moon opposition Jupiter, Moon opposition Saturn, and that what we well, in fact, we've got a grand cross in that chart, and if we relocate this chart to Tokyo. So January 20th, 1941, but we relocate for Tokyo, the capital city of the country that launched the Pearl Harbor attack. We can see that Uranus is exactly on the descendant. So Uranus represents a sudden attack by your enemies on the descendant. So I think that chart works quite well. Another inauguration I wanted to look at was the inauguration of Herbert Hoover on March the 4th, 1929. So this was a Republican's third term. I mean, first term was Warren Harding. He died in office, and it was Calvin Coolidge, and then Hoover took over. And this is a pretty terrible chart as well. So you've got Mars fairly close to the ascendant, pretty close to the ascendant. You've got Saturn close to the descendant. So you've got a Mars-Saturn opposition right across the ascendant. And in this case, 1929 was the year of the Wall Street crash, the Great Depression. So this was a presidency that really did end in disaster for the country. And of course, Hoover, he stood again in 1932, and Roosevelt beat him. So I think there is a little bit of evidence here that inauguration charts do matter. I know it's a small sample. And so if we look at Trump's inauguration, the thing that bothers me about this chart is Mars conjunct the IC. You can see it's very close. And so what does Mars represent? I mean, Mars could represent war. Simple as that. It could represent conflict. I mean, I have looked at this chart before on a previous video, and I have suggested war, but one of the commenters suggested that it might actually be internal conflict. I mean, I suppose is that civil war, a country that is not at peace with itself. I mean, I don't think it's really worth thinking about civil war. I don't think that's what it's really about. But it is about conflict. This is not going to be an easy presidency, and it may not be Trump's fault. Remember, as soon as they decided to switch to the January 2020 inauguration, so in 1940, when you look forward 85 years, you knew, if you were into astrology, that Mars was going to be on the IC. So it doesn't matter who became president. If Kamala Harris had have won, this would have been her inauguration chart. So it's not about the candidates themselves. It's about the kind of things that the candidates have to deal with as presidents if they win. So that Mars conjunct Saturn, Mars conjunct the IC does really stand out. Additionally, Venus conjunct Saturn. So if you are of the view that the Trump presidency is going to be disastrous for women's rights, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just saying that reality is that many people in America were saying that Trump as president would be a disaster for women's rights, reproductive rights, and so forth. Again, I'm not making any comment about that. I'm just telling you what is true. It is true that a lot of people were worried about Trump and women's rights. Is Venus conjunct Saturn. So if you are a Democrat, that kind of supports your argument, doesn't it? New president, Venus conjunct Saturn. Venus is a universal significator of women. So yeah, it could be about women's rights and reproductive rights. I don't know. But I'm just raising that as a possibility. And the Sun is conjunct Pluto. Pluto is a slow-moving planet, so in 4 years' time, the Sun is still going to be fairly close to the conjunction of Pluto, but it is pretty exact, within 1 degree, and the Sun is about the president, Sun in Aquarius, conjunct Pluto. So there is something dramatic about this chart with Sun conjunct Pluto. It's probably going to be a fairly tumultuous 4 years with that Mars on the IC. Now, how does America feel about it? What's going on in America's chart when Trump becomes inaugurated? Now, remember, it would have been the same thing if it had been Kamala Harris. So if we look at the USA's chart, and so we've got USA's chart in the middle, and on the outer wheel we've got the inauguration chart. So Mars 24 Cancer at the time of inauguration. So that Mars is conjunct the United States is Mercury, and its sort of opposition, United States is Pluto. I mean, the mid-heaven is always going to be, at inauguration, is all... while inaugurations take place on January the 20th, the mid-heaven of an inauguration chart will always be conjunct the United States' Pluto while we're on this time zone. Okay, if America decided to move to have daylight saving time right through the winter, of course that would change. But as it stands, the mid-heaven links with America's Pluto, and that does make sense, doesn't it? Pluto is about life and death. It's about the old regime coming to an end, the new regime starting, and it happens exactly on at noon. So that is so appropriate, having the conjunction, the midheaven always conjunct Pluto in every modern inauguration chart. But Mars is hitting it. Mars is hitting America's Mercury, and I suppose Mercury could be about the way people think. Mercury could be about the media. It's mainstream media, alternative media, what people are thinking about, what people are talking about, and it is something very controversial, and the mind of the country is really exploded by this Mars and the fact that Mercury's opposition Pluto. Now, does that relate to everyone, or does it relate to people who are opponents of Trump? But it's something disturbing. And we would have this if Kamala Harris had been elected president. And perhaps this is a reflection of the fact that America is a very divided society. Half the population are always going to be unhappy with the result. And Mars conjunct Mercury, I would have said, stirs things up in quite a big way. And then you have to consider what's happening to Donald when he starts his second term. What does it mean for him? And with Trump, firstly, that Venus conjunct Saturn, which takes place at the time of the inauguration, it reflects the fact that Trump has Venus conjunct Saturn in his chart anyway. And I've talked about that before. My interpretation of his Venus conjunct Saturn was that he'd already beaten one woman, Hillary Clinton, and he was about to beat another woman. I mean, that was one of the reasons why, and one of the many reasons I thought that Donald Trump was going to win, was because of that Venus conjunct Saturn and the fact that there was a Venus conjunct Saturn at the time of the inauguration. So that could be the man who has just beaten a female candidate. If you are concerned about reproductive rights and how women are going to be impacted, then you might be concerned about the fact that Trump has Venus conjunct Saturn in his natal chart, and there's Venus conjunct Saturn at the time of his inauguration, though you could see Venus conjunct Saturn in other ways. I mean, regardless of what you think about Trump, there seems to be no doubt that in the past he has treated some of the women in his life in a way that is not 100% respectful, and I don't think that is a party political comment. I think that is true. But so there's his Venus conjunct Saturn, and Mars is aspecting. He's got Mars conjunct his Venus, Mars conjunct his Saturn. So that does really highlight his Venus Saturn conjunction, and how he's feeling about it. And Venus conjunct Saturn, there is a certain toughness there, and something is being hidden, perhaps, and so that we'll see how that Venus conjunct Saturn unfolds in during his presidency. And Uranus 2318 Taurus, so he's got his midheaven at 2422 Taurus. So Uranus, he's got Uranus on his midheaven. So as far as he's concerned, this is a big change. I mean, it is the midheaven is your way forward, your goals. And before he got elected, some people were saying, oh, he was going to lose because Uranus was on his midheaven, that this would be a negative thing for his career. But I took the view at the time that it was quite neutral. It was certainly dramatic. I mean, it was neutral, but was also dramatic. You could read it both ways. Uranus on the midheaven, losing the election to Kamala, that fits Uranus on the midheaven. Uranus on the midheaven could be about him winning, as it happened. So Uranus on the midheaven, we do have a dramatic change in the way he presents himself. So that's this chart and how it impacts Trump himself. And going back to this chart, I think that my view on the Trump presidency, aside from the inauguration chart, and this is a view I've already expressed, is that if you look at Trump's chart, there are certainly challenges. I mean, no doubt about it. Here's Trump's chart. He's got the Sun, North Node, Uranus in Gemini, and so what's going to happen is that over the next few months, Saturn is going to be square his Sun, Saturn is going to be square his Uranus, Saturn is going to be square his node, and that Saturn is going to come from his 7th, 8th house, depending on what house system you use. And that might be his enemies. I think that Trump's enemies have not gone away just because he's become president. And so over the next few months, I think there's going to be a lot of resistance. Of course, those enemies could also be from abroad. He has promised, for example, to end America's war against Russia, or perceiving it as the Ukraine conflict. He's promised to end it, but how easy is it going to be? I mean, there are people who are going to want to persist with the war, including the Russians. So that Saturn may represent obstacles, not just in terms of his opponents at home, but also his opponents abroad. So it's not necessarily going to be easy. On the other hand, Trump does have a Jupiter-Saturn square in his chart. And I kind of like the Jupiter-Saturn square in his chart because it's an applying Jupiter-Saturn square. There was a conjunction between Jupiter-Saturn in the early 40s and new Jupiter-Saturn cycle. He's got Jupiter-Saturn in mutual reception by exaltation, even though Jupiter-Saturn is in its detriment in Cancer, but it's still they're in mutual reception. Jupiter and Saturn are in each other's exaltation. And usually that first quarter Jupiter-Saturn square represents the start of an uptick in the business cycle. So even though there might be hiccups at the beginning of his reign, if you like, I think the American economy looks, as far as I'm concerned, quite good between now and 2029. So that is a feature of his time in office. But the question is, what's he going to have to do to keep the American economy afloat? And as I've already suggested, I think things are going to just explode 2029, 2030 with a Jupiter-Saturn opposition. So this is, in a way, the last hurrah, not just for the American economy, but maybe for the global economy as well, although the economic situation in Europe and in the UK does look pretty dire. So that is something positive. But what I think could really spoil the Trump presidency is what happens abroad. In terms of global conflict. Now, going back to the inauguration, it may be worthwhile relocating it to different places. So if we relocate the inauguration to, say, Damascus, so Damascus has is obviously capital of Syria, and everything seems to be fine. Well, I don't know if it is fine. These sort of Islamic groups who have taken over Syria, supported by the West, it's not good. It's not going to work well. And so if you set Trump's chart up for Damascus, you have Uranus on the midheaven, and that suggests an area where there could be trouble. Damascus, Syria, but it's not just Syria. I mean, if you set a map up for if you set the chart up for, say, Israel. I couldn't find a chart which represented the whole of the Middle East, but sorry, that is way too detailed. We don't have too many lines, but I think you can see that the line. There are lots of lines there, but the one line I'm really thinking about is this red line here. This is all the places where Uranus is on the midheaven, and you can see it goes through sort of the West Bank. I mean, it's close enough to Jerusalem, and there's Jerusalem here, and if it goes down through Syria, goes up through Lebanon, and so it is a dangerous part of the world for Trump and for the inauguration. So my guess is that with the Middle East and this particular part of the Middle East, people are talking about the fact that there's now peace, there's a ceasefire, everything's fine. Is this going to last? I don't think so. And I think that this part of the world, the Middle East, could represent a lot of trouble for Trump. The other problem area is, of course, Russia. And so if we relocate the inauguration to Moscow, again, Uranus, you can see that Uranus is on the midheaven, because this Uranus on the midheaven line goes through Moscow, goes down through Russia, goes through Turkey, and goes down through Israel, Lebanon, and so forth. So it's all on the same line. So this is the line that perhaps Trump needs to worry about. And so turning to hold on, let me look at the astromap for the world, just to show you what I mean. So here is the Uranus conjunct the midheaven line. You see it goes through Russia, close to Moscow, goes through Turkey, then all the way down, and then goes into Africa. Maybe there's stuff going on in Africa we don't know about. I mean, there's always something going on in Africa, but Africa kind of gets ignored. But for all we know, there could be Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, East Africa. So there may be stuff going on there which the administration has to focus on, something completely unexpected. So I do think that Uranus conjunct the midheaven is the line that we really need to think about. So that's one reason why we should be concerned, because the old trouble spots, Russia, the Middle East, are likely to manifest. And another thing going on is that Uranus is moving into Gemini. And when Uranus moves into Gemini, the United States tends to go to war. Uranus was moving into Gemini at the time of the Civil War. That's right. Uranus was in Gemini when at the time of the Declaration of Independence. There it is, Uranus in Gemini. Uranus was in Gemini not right at the beginning of the Second World War. Uranus was in Taurus at the time of Pearl Harbor, but a few months later, Uranus went into Gemini. So Uranus goes into Gemini during Trump's term of office. And to give you an example, here is the United States' solar return for 2026. Okay, that's not for another 18 months, but time flies. So at the time of United States' solar return, there is a Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, and given America's history, that is dangerous. I don't know whether the United States could really be literally at war in 2026, but it could be involved in quite a major conflict. Does that mean that despite Trump's best efforts, the war in Ukraine is going to be continuing? I mean, that is a possibility, but it could be somewhere else, and that is something we do need to think about. And if you jump 2 years, and because Uranus does stay in, Uranus stays in Gemini for 7 years. So if we jump 2 years, June the 23rd, 2028, there is a Mars-Uranus conjunction, and involving Mercury. So you've got Mercury, Mars, and Uranus all conjunct each other, and if you compare that with the United States' chart, so if we put the USA's chart in the middle, Trump will still be president unless he's, if he's still alive, or maybe he resigns because of poor health or whatever. He may decide after 2 years he wants to hand over to Vance. I don't know. But there is the USA's descendant, and this Mars-Uranus-Mercury conjunction is right on USA's descendant, which does seem really, really dangerous. So in terms of Trump's presidency, I think economically it will be fine, provided the USA doesn't find itself dragged into war. So war has not gone away. But it may be the case, astrologically. The thing about astrology is, when you notice a pattern, when you really start to notice a pattern, the moment you notice a pattern is when the pattern breaks. So probably just about every astrologer who's interested in astrology and politics will probably be thinking about this Uranus in Gemini, and get really excited about Uranus in Gemini. But it may just be that this time round, the pattern is going to break. This time round, Uranus is going to go into Gemini, and it will be, a damp squib. Nothing will happen. Rather like, remember the curse, some Indian curse that every president elected in, a year ending in 0 dies in office. You think about Kennedy was elected in 1960, and FDR was elected in 1940, and Warren Harding in 1920, that curse. But in the end, everyone was really focusing on that curse. Perhaps so many people were focusing on the curse broke, and of course Reagan was elected in 1980. He was shot, but he survived, and so Reagan broke the curse, and then George Bush Jr., he was elected in 2000, he didn't die. So maybe, and I'm trying to be optimistic here, the Uranus in Gemini effect will break, and this will be the cycle, but the first time Uranus goes into Gemini where America doesn't find itself at war. We'll have to see. But I still think Uranus in going into Gemini is going to be quite dangerous for the United States. So that's it. That's all I've got to say for the moment about Trump's inauguration. I will have a lot more to say about it over the next few sort of months and hopefully years. And so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy the video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.